this is Troy Fullwood with Pinnacle Investment, and I wanted to just thank you very much for stopping by here at the Propelio Academy. I've been invited here by Darren and Ryan to impart some wisdom on you about real estate notes and mortgages. Now, this is an industry that I've been a part of for the last 23 years. I've done over 15,000 transactions in excess of $1.7 billion in transactional history. So I got a few tricks up my sleeve in how this business works and how this industry works. Now, my goal here in the next several, sessions is I want to teach you the basics of real estate notes. Now, some of you may be beyond this, and some of you may just be learning this, and either way, that's perfectly okay. The goal here is to share with you what I call best practices in using real estate notes to build generational wealth for you, your family, and your company. Now, one of the things that I often deal with, or have to see, the pleasure of receiving, is on the backside, oftentimes people will bring real estate notes to me after they're already done. And I often find that there's a lot of mistakes in the real estate notes that were created. The mistakes oftentimes affect the credit, they oftentimes affect the yield, they also oftentimes affect the returns. There's challenges, legal challenges that have been, forgotten, or legal challenges that have been brought into the deal that didn't necessarily need to be brought into the deal. And these are the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about. But more importantly, I'm going to spend the next session, or the next several sessions anyways, to talk with you about what I call best practices. And if you put these things into practice in the note business, aka if you're wholesaling notes, or if you're using notes to buy real estate, or if you're using notes to sell real estate, it's one of the more popular things to do. Actually, it's so popular that it's a $1.7 trillion industry. Now, to give you an idea, the entire residential mortgage industry is a $10 trillion industry. Okay, so we're about 17% of what I would call the government level, or the institutional level, being 10 trillion. We're about 1.7 trillion, so we're about 17% of all of the, notes and mortgages that are created in the space. Now, you're going to hear me talk about a lot of different things, but I want to clear up some things as far as the terminology that I like to use, because I don't want to confuse anybody at any time. When I say the word note, or notes as in plural, what I'm referencing is the entire transaction, okay? Meaning that every real estate note transaction is a note, which outlines the, the financial agreement. Then you've got the deed of trust or the mortgage, depending upon what state the property is in, and that outlines the, the additional legal agreement, meaning the property condition, taxes, and things of that nature, and that document gets recorded. And then you've got the warranty deed, which actually transfers title from the seller to the buyer. So when I use the word notes, I'm referencing all of that. Now, another caveat here I want to put in is if I use the word notes or mortgages, kind of one and the same to me. It's kind of like a, difference between an apple, one type of apple versus a Fuji apple versus a Honeycrisp apple. They're still an apple, but they're different types of apples. When I say notes as well, we're also going to be referencing land contracts, agreement for deeds, contract for deeds, and things of that nature. So although oftentimes those things are used, and we'll get into more granular aspects of those later on down the road in the academy. But for today's video and for today's purpose, I want to establish the foundation. I want to establish a baseline so that everybody understands exactly what I'm referencing. That way we don't confuse anybody and we don't leave anybody behind, because we don't want to do that at any level. So with that being said, notes being the commercial or institutional side of the business is a $10 trillion industry. But the private seller financing side of the business is a $1.7 trillion industry. Now, some people say it's 1.5, some people say it's 1.9, but for all intents and purposes, let's just pick 1.7 to pick a happy medium. What that means is that there's $1.7 trillion worth of residential real estate, residential real estate that is sold seller financing. Now, what is seller financing? What is a note? Well, seller financing is easily explained as a glorified IOU, as a glorified IOU. I don't know if any of you were in elementary school. I'm assuming you all were. Lord knows I was. And in elementary school, if I traded if I gave a candy bar to a buddy of mine, he in turn would owe me, 25 cents. Now I'm really dating myself when I say 25 cents because candy bars ain't 25 cents anymore. But he would write me an IOU on his desk and he would give it to me, and like the next day I would cash my IOU in for my 25 cents. And therein lies the payment of the candy bar. Notes are the same thing. Now, the great thing about notes in the seller finance model, meaning you and me, I'm not an institution, you're not an institution, meaning we're not a bank, we're not Wall Street. It's just you and me making an agreement, is that when you and I write an IOU, we can have it be anything we want it to be, which is fantastic because it, opens up the door for creativity. Now, the challenge with that is it opens up the door for creativity. And so it's a double-edged sword right across the board. So it's kind of like, looking at art. You and I might go into an art gallery and we walk through it and you like this type of an artist and I like that type of an artist. So, aka art is subjective and so is notes. But I can honestly say that if we both walked into an art gallery and we saw, a Picasso, we might look at that and both appreciate the entire the work that went into creating that Picasso, and we'd have a tremendous amount of respect for everything that was done. Not to mention the Picasso goes up in value, which is what you want to have your notes do. You want to have them go up in value year in and year out. And I'm going to show you how to do that by putting in place what I call best practices across the board. So, some of the things that I want to start with on best practices, number one on a best practice is your interest rate, on a note. Interest rate on a note, you need to keep it between 7 to 9%. Interest rate. Down payment, what I call down payment. I would say you need to have at least 10% down payment from your buyer. Your terms. Terms, you want 10, 15, 20, or 30-year terms. Now, that will change, and I'll come back to that, and I'm going to come back to each of these in just a moment. And then last but not least, credit. Credit, you want to have it about a 600 or better credit score. Now, these four ingredients, and they say terms, conditions, whatever terminology you want to use, these four aspects are imperative for creating a good, solid note deal. Now, I'm talking about best practices, and when I talk about best practices, it kind of goes along with like a best practice in driving would be to wear a seatbelt. That would be a best practice in driving. Why? Well, I don't plan on getting in an accident, and I'm sure you don't plan on getting in an accident either. But if something happens outside of our control, which can often happen, I want to make sure I'm safe, and I want to make sure that my loved ones are safe as well. Now, I can choose not to wear a seatbelt and probably won't get in an accident as well. So I understand both sides of the argument. But what we're talking about here, these are the different characteristics that will go into a note, which is a legal binding agreement in every single state in the country. So anytime you enter into a legal binding agreement and everybody signs on it after it's written up and everybody signs on it and it closes, it's really hard to unravel that legal binding agreement. Why? Because that means everybody else has to come back to the table and renegotiate or re-agree on the terms. Buyers of homes don't want to come back to the table after they've already purchased the house unless there's a massive benefit for them. The massive benefit might be a lower interest rate. You're not necessarily going to give them money back, and you can't maybe change the terms a little bit, but you can't really do anything about their credit, so you actually end up taking a loss to do those kinds of things. So, number one, let me see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down in the next session because I want to stay on track with what I'm thinking here. So these are going to be best practices in your business. The key to all of this is when you're marketing a house or you're, working on, I'm going to assume that the majority of the audience here are rehabbers or seasoned or new wholesalers, whatever that may be. The thing that you want to always keep in mind is that when you're marketing your product and you're marketing your properties, I would say, would be another word, is you want to make sure that you're putting out marketing material that attracts the right buyer all the time, okay? You want to make sure that that buyer that's coming to you is one that can afford your payments and things of that nature, and we're going to deep dive into all of that in the next session. So right there is your basic understanding of real estate notes. Real estate notes are glorified IOU. It's a huge industry. You may be new to the industry. You may be trying to understand what the industry is, which is why I welcome you here to the Academy. We're going to, slowly, unravel this or unwrap this entire industry for you over the next session. And therefore, by the time you get through the entire Academy, on the notes section anyways, you're going to have a really good understanding. You're also going to have what I would call best practices in place, and you're also going to have tools and resources that you can actually use to put notes in as a tool in your real estate investing toolbox. So with that being said, we'll see you back here on the next session, session number 2.